The book itself is called Long-Term Care, Alternatives and Solutions. And when I wrote the book in 2000, I had no idea that I would become kind of a lightning rod for this kind of a situation, because nobody was talking about long-term care 12 years ago. I had gone through it with my parents, and my dad had been the budget director for the state of New Hampshire. He had suffered a debilitating stroke, he had been blinded, and as a consequence, he and my mother lived in a farmhouse in New Hampshire. Well, the problem was she had heart disease, and we assumed that he would pass away from the stroke. But within 3 years, she was gone. And all of a sudden, I was dealing with a very angry person who was blind. And one of the side effects of strokes can be this kind of an effect, this anger. Not only that, but he was also a master sergeant of the U.S. Army during World War II, and he never failed to tell me about that. But as a budget director for major state government, he was a person who had some authority and power and understood money and all of these things, and yet he had done no planning whatsoever for long-term care. So in the grand scheme of things, I got up to speed very quickly, because as a financial advisor, it was something I thought, gee, nobody is talking about this. Now, this goes back 20 years ago. Today, just about everybody's talking about it, and wonder why. We're all getting older. And as we get older, we have all of these additional problems. Now, when I say to you, everybody should have long-term care, I absolutely mean it. Because if we all had it, we spread the risk. And as the money comes in, it allows everybody to get some level of coverage. That's the ideal world. The real world is we're dealing with an event that is in the future, that is hard to identify, that may not happen to you, but the likelihood, as you see on pages 2 and 3, is extremely high that it could happen. And in this audience in particular, there is a higher incidence of that already occurring than most of the audiences I speak to. So when you look at this material today, try to keep in mind we're trying to address this in a general sense for everybody's benefit. And it's not just because I'm talking to Parkinson's today. So when we talk about pages 2 and 3, that's what we're referring to as the likelihood, possibility of that kind of a problem occurring, and the cost. I had one client several years ago come in, and she incurred in 1 year a cost of $1 million to care for her spouse before he passed away. Now, I'm not here to try and scare you, because nobody could have ever planned ahead for something like that. But he had a series of events that caused that to happen. It is not at all unusual to see costs for people going through long-term care events to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's the kind of advanced planning work we do to try and make sure that when the event occurs, we've got the coverage in place to at least offset some of that, to adjust for it, to provide good tax planning, to look at government programs that are available. Now, I would imagine that some of you are military veterans. I would encourage you to look to the Veterans Administration, because even though my father was told he was not entitled to benefits at the time, and several of my clients have been in a similar situation, by pushing against the door, we have been able to get people benefits that they initially were told they were not qualified to receive. The same is true of Social Security. We have come across situations which absolutely surprised us. We did not realize that there were these kinds of possible ways to get at benefits. So if you have not taken the time or thought you weren't qualified, please take the time to check with the local offices, and if you don't get a result you like, look further. Because one of my clients spent almost a year getting veterans benefits he was entitled to because he was exposed to Agent Orange during the Vietnam War. And he was told repeatedly by the VA he was not qualified. But at the end of the day, after he'd given up, 3 months went by, he got a letter out of the blue. And in the letter it said, "We are starting to pay you $3,000 a month, allowing you to have access to prescription drugs and giving you coverage for long-term care for the rest of your life." And he was a person who, a captain in the U.S. Army, successful businessman, he never ever thought that he'd be using government benefits. But this made a huge difference in his life.